Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
David Waters here with Gators Breakdown with another edition of Championship Rewind. This time, 2008 version. Gators win their third national championship. 2008, it was a season with some high expectations. A disappointing 2007 after winning the national championship in 2006. But 2008, some high expectations. Even with a down 2007, Florida had some high expectations in 2008. You had Heisman Trophy winner Tim Tebow returning, roster filled with future NFL talent, a talented, maybe one of the best players in Florida history, Percy Harvin. Florida was still a popular pick to win the SEC, still a popular pick to win the national championship, and they did. I mean, going into that season in 2008, everybody was picking Georgia to win the national championship. Florida comes out at the end of that season with their third national championship, one loss in the regular season to Ole Miss, of course. But once again, just like 2006, going against a Heisman Trophy winner, Sam Bradford, Oklahoma, rolls into Miami. Florida shuts down that offense for their third national championship. Tate Casey, Brandon James joins me on this edition of Championship Rewind for the 2008 national championship.
2008, kind of much of the same storyline in a way. You're going against the Heisman Trophy winner and Sam Bradford this time in an Oklahoma offense scoring over 50 points a game. How much was made in this game going against an offense that could not be stopped?
I'm a junior at that point, one of the leaders on the team. That point being, 3 years in with Coach Myers, supreme confidence. You know what I mean? Like, even though we had a slip up during that year, supreme confidence going into the game. We weren't, of course we had respect for them. We knew what they brought to the table, but we just couldn't see a situation where we would lose. And so going into the game, that was our mindset. All bowl practice, that was our mindset. We approached the game that way.
We were very blessed to be the team that nobody really, they didn't count us out, but they also didn't put too much faith in us. But I think that in the same sense, the 06 team was the grit, the hard nose, the blue collar. The 08 team was Hollywood. It was, man, we were primed for the show spotlight. That was what we lived for. And I think when you look at that team and just the mentality that we carried around with us, it was almost less of a chip on our shoulder and more of a, you better recognize, because we're not here to let anybody off. Our biggest thing, we came for the spotlight, and we're ready for it.
One of those moments of getting back there after Ole Miss loss, of course, in the famous Tebow promise speech, and the Gators went on a tear the rest of the season. The games wasn't close up until the SEC championship game against Alabama that year. Just a quick description of refocusing after that loss and what it took for you guys to get back to the ultimate spot.
It stung a little more with the Ole Miss game because it was at home to a team that we knew was lesser opponent. To be quite honest with you, it's not really a knock on Ole Miss. They should have won that game. When you go back and watch that film, there wasn't really anything spectacular about the Ole Miss game. Very vanilla, but a handful of plays, a block extra point that sends the game into overtime at worst. That's something so routine that should never happen. Honestly, it's just attention to detail and the small things that you take, with a grain of salt and move on. But on the other hand, you also probably wouldn't have made it to the national championship game without taking that blow to the stomach. So for us, I think we needed that. It kind of humbled us a little bit and got us right back on track.
I think Tebow did a good job with his speech, but I think in the locker room, you have so many different leaders on that team to where everyone kind of just took it upon themselves to kind of lead their group and their position group. And, when we came back, because we always had walkthrough / kind of like a 7-on-7 on Sundays. Coming back that Sunday, everyone just refocused. And you could tell the team was different after the loss. Because we felt like we should have been undefeated that year. We felt like we're the best team in the nation. And to lose to Ole Miss, that just, everyone felt like they let each other down. So, that on that Sunday, you could just tell all the focus was different with everybody. You know what I mean? And again, I think Tebow did a good job of letting the media know how everybody felt. But each group had their own set of leaders to kind of push everyone coming into the next week.
Honestly, it hurt. There's only a handful of times that I could honestly say it hurt I mean, it hurt because we knew exactly what a perfect season meant to us. I think we knew what kind of team we were, and we knew exactly what we were shooting for. And I think very similar to how 2009 really struck Tim in the Alabama game and the SC championship game. You know when an opportunity slips away. Obviously when a loss is behind you, there's nothing you can do about it. You got to move on to the next. It doesn't take the sting away. There's some games you lose in college football that you honestly walk away and go, man, we played terrible. We played bad the whole game. Not much you can do about it. That was one of our worst days. That game probably sat in my stomach for 2 weeks, even preparing for the next, knowing that there was no reason we should have lost that game. And I think that's what hurt the most. But I'd agree with Brandon. I don't think had Tim given the speech or not, it wasn't going to change the way that team approached the week after or approached the rest of the season. We had been there before for a team that faced a lot of adversity throughout the year, for a team that personally had players that were facing adversity week by week. And those are your brothers. You obviously understand and relate, and you're trying to cope through stuff together. For us, I don't think that was going to really be too much of a hurdle.
Was there a sense that since Sam Bradford was the Heisman winner that you guys want to go out there and prove that maybe Tebow should have been the Heisman winner, or did him winning of course, playing against for the defense anyway, him playing against another Heisman winner was a motivating factor. But a lot of people still felt like Tim Tebow should have been the Heisman winner in 2008 after he won in 2007.
I can tell you I was one of them. Watching the Heisman ceremonies and everything that year was pretty disappointing considering the season that he had and what we were going through as a team. But I think it was the mentality, and everybody says, man, those 06 and 08 teams were so good. He had so much talent, he had so much skill, he had so much speed, and you had Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen, and that's great. Obviously, they're not wrong, but at the same time, I think if you separated all that and you literally just peeked behind the curtains and saw the mindset of a football team and how they prepared every single day, whether it's the season or the off season, the thing about all those teams was their mentality, the mental toughness aspect. And I can't tell you how much money I would pay Mick Marotti if I was an athletic director. I'm telling you right now, for what he does from a mental toughness aspect and builds a team, him and Matt Bayless and his staff, those 2 years, from 05 to 9-10, they deserve some of the biggest credit for what we accomplished as a football team on the field.
I actually think Percy should have been in the runnings for it. I all respect to Tebow. He did a great job both years, but there's no way Percy Harvin, what he did in 08, he shouldn't have been some kind of way in the runnings. You know what I mean? Not even a candidate. So I can't really, on statistics, I can't really speak on him, Tim's statistics and Sam's, but I know what Percy did that year. So I think I'll be an advocate for him and say he should at least been a candidate.
Now, this one's a little bit different. You're playing in Miami against Oklahoma. Could you guys sense the crowd difference going? You try and compare national championship games, and 2 years before that, as we talked about, you had a heavy Ohio State crowd. Well, this time you're playing in Miami. Gator fans didn't have to travel as far. The stadium was a lot of orange and blue this time. Was that something you guys noticed, or was it just kind of business as usual?
Not really. I wouldn't say in those bowl games, not really. Again, when you're in a bowl game, that's all the motivation you need. We could have been playing in Oklahoma, and I think we'd have still been just as motivated. We'd have been just as riled up. That kind of would have probably made it better. You know what I mean? We wouldn't have been as lax and, as comfortable during the week. So I don't think it really plays a big part. I mean, it helps, when you hear, all the Gator love you're getting from the crowd. But at the same time, I don't think it played that big of a part.
No, I think, like I said, that 08 team lived for the spotlight. We knew exactly who was going to show up to that game in full force. So, the Gator Nation was with us that night. I think we not only carried a lot of swag into that game, but probably for the first time of hearing about an opponent that, could put us out of the race. I think we did actually carry a chip, on our shoulder that game. You're coming off an Alabama win against an Alabama team that could have easily probably won the national championship that year. So for us, I think we didn't hear a lot about, hey, Florida's really the team to beat. We didn't hear a lot about how good Florida was. We heard a lot about this explosive offense with Oklahoma. And I think for us, it was like, did anybody watch the SEC championship game last week when we played Alabama? Because if you wanted to see a title, heavyweight fight, that was it. And so for us, I think the biggest thing was to come out, and when the lights turned on, man, we were ready to go.
Well, we weren't sure going into that game when the lights turned on if Percy Harvin was going to be out there. Wasn't 100%. He had that FSU game where he got hurt, suffered an injury there versus the Seminoles. How much did preparation change into that game, not knowing if Percy was going to be available or not? And how, in your mind, how close to 100% was he going into that game?
For me and everybody on our team, I think nothing really changed in the preparation on our end, because you can't really control whether a player's going to be able to go or not. And I think that you've got to find whatever the game plan is going to be. And you probably have one with him, one without him, but you approach the game no matter what, the way you have to. And that means your focus is full pledge on the game plan. Your preparation has to be on point, and you can't really stray from that. Now, I will say that nobody really knows the backstory to Percy during the from about the SEC championship game to the national championship game, just how much effort and work that he put in, personal time that the strength staff and the training staff put in to get him ready to go. But I know he stayed on campus, Christmas vacation, Christmas break, and all that. He was on campus working out and getting ready to go for that game. And I think the biggest thing that us as teammates look at that, he was doing everything he had to do to make sure he didn't let his brothers down. And there's a lot of people who don't really understand, what that takes, what kind of mindset that takes. But that was the mentality of every single person on that team. If there was a guy down, he'd do everything he could to get back on that field to make sure he didn't leave a gap to cover in the rest of that game.
I think he was around 75, 80. And again, that's why I said for him not even be a candidate. I seen him do some things like he didn't practice at all leading up to that national title game. It was strictly rehab and just getting the ankle ready to go. But he didn't take practice with us probably at all. And then, you seen what he did in the national title game. Mm-hmm. So, and we've seen him do it in the NFL where he didn't hardly any practice and gets out there and almost is the MVP of the Super Bowl. So, he's a special athlete, man. He's probably easily, I could probably say, even after playing in the NFL for a year and going to Canada, probably the best player I've ever played with and seen with my own two eyes because he's just able to do some things other people can't do. Yeah, he's probably about 80% though.
Well, I'm sure the juices were already flowing, but if they weren't flowing, first Oklahoma drive, throw down the sideline. There's a huge hit, major right on an Oklahoma wide receiver down the sideline. We've joked about it on social media before. There's something we can see Tate Casey making sure the Oklahoma wide receiver lets him know that he's over there by some Gators and he just got his bell rung. So what did that hit do for you guys? Much kind of like the Earl Everett hit a couple years before that, but what did that hit do for you guys? And if you can, what did you say?
Ball was in the air, and it's almost like you're an outfielder going back towards the wall. You're kind of looking at two places at once. You're looking at the ball, but you're looking down. You're looking at the ball, back at the wall. I'm looking at the ball, looking at Major, looking at the ball, and looking at Major, and I'm going, oh, it's about to be an explosion. And I think, probably as the ball's descending down, I kind of start my it happens right in front of you, and you got to give it to him. The guy's right on the sideline. You're gonna give him an earful and make sure he doesn't forget that one for the rest of the game. You've got to appreciate good defensive play. You're hard pressed to find those once in a decade, once in an era type safety that can make those kind of plays. And Reggie Nelson was the first that I'd played with. I think really. Major Wright kind of became that second and a different type of player, a different type of skill set. But it's just whispering a few sweet nothings. It wasn't much. I was just letting him make sure he knew that the safety wasn't going anywhere in the next three quarters. So for us, it is something that gets you fired up. Back then you could make those kind of hits, and as a safety, I imagine you maybe live for 40 years to hit one person like that, and Major lined him up on the first drive. So for us, I think that really set the tone for the defense, and the defense played about as good as you could have played all night. And when you look at Ahmad Black and Joe Hayden and those guys, Janoris Jenkins, how they played and how they responded to it as a defensive unit, I mean, it was lights out for the rest of the night.
Talking about a tone setter, man. And, again, I think our defense had all their receivers and backs on edge after that play. You know what I mean? Our sideline erupted and went crazy. Guys were almost on the field. I remember coaches having to hold guys back because we were trying to talk to the kid that was laying on the ground. But, again, they're talking about a big tone setter.
Well, surprisingly, Tebow struggles early in the game. 2 turnovers early. Both offenses can't really get going. Any worry for you guys of some early struggles by Tebow?
No, I mean, again, you're talking about a team that had supreme confidence. So we knew, especially when the defense is just stopping them, they're not putting up any points, and they were high-powered all year. So we're turning the ball over, but they're not really capitalizing on it. You know, it's just one of those things where we knew if we could just get it rolling in the right direction, we'd be fine. And, you never worry about Tim because he has supreme confidence. He knows he's just a play away from making a special play. So you're not worried about him getting down on himself or anything like that. We just, just staying to course and, trying to execute the next play.
No, from 06 to 08, 05, I think we had a few games where mentally you'd be on the sideline and, I can recall Alabama be a prime example. Tyrone Prothro went down to Alabama game, that memorable game in Tuscaloosa for me as a player and for a lot of guys that probably were at that game playing. The mental toughness I knew wasn't quite there as a team, but I think about halfway through that game, you don't check out of the game, but mentally you're sitting there going, man, we're getting beat. I'm not saying we're out of it, but you get about the third quarter, early fourth quarter, you start questioning and doubting a little bit as a team. After the 06 season started until I graduated after the Oklahoma game, didn't have that once. And I think that was really the championship level mentality we had that set in the 06 offseason. And so, going into halftime of that Miami game, the championship game in Miami, the OU game, there wasn't a shred of doubt that we had that game if we did what we needed to do. Obviously, you had turnovers. You had a couple drives that we gave up some stuff on the defensive side of the ball. But the defense also had a couple stout performances in the first half. And for us as an offense, I think we really took it upon ourselves at halftime that we got to step our game up. And the defense was doing exactly what they needed to do to give us an opportunity to win the game. We just needed to really step it up. And Tim came in fired up, and he was like, listen, no more, right? Part of that's on me. We know what we got to do. No more. We're going out second half. We got to get this done, and that's exactly what we did.
Hey, right before that, as you said, right before halftime, the defense had its second of goal line stands in that first half. Go back and to me, going back at being at the game and going back and watching those games as well, I think that was the moment right there when we knew Oklahoma could score points all over the field, but they couldn't score them right there. It was at that point right there where you probably knew, all right, no matter what happened, Florida was in good shape because of those 2 goal line stands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at those, goal line stands in the ditch, when you look at Brandon Spikes in that front 7, right, with Torrey Davis and Carlos Dunlap and some of the guys you had on that front 7, we had some great players. I think that OU honestly started to second guess how good they were as a passing team because – Bradford wasn't really threading the needle. You had Jermaine Gresham. You had a lot of good, capable receivers in the red zone for OU, and they couldn't get anything done. I think for us as an offense, looking at it, going, all right, man, defense came to play. We got to find a way to get our stuff together. And I remember Steve Adazio, John Hevesy really kind of grouping us up as a front line and tight ends and even receivers and saying, listen, we've got to be absolutely flawless and play our game. The biggest thing we're not doing right now is executing the game plan. And so I think once we got that under control, there wasn't much to it. It's just a matter of going out against a really good team and a really good defense and getting it done.
Our defense that year, I'm telling you, I thought it was special that we were able to even hold them down how we did. I mean, because you hear so much leading to that game, the fast break offense. I remember preparing that week, we had to line up 2 offenses for the defense to make it, game game-like so they can see the speed and how quick they get back to the line of scrimmage and all that good stuff there. And I think our defense and the way Coach Strong prepared them, they handled it perfect.
We'll focus on the defense just a bit more too. Brandon Spikes, just talk about the leader, the kind of leader he was on that side of the ball. Had some big plays during the season, right? LSU touchdown return in that game, but he just kind of seemed to be the linchpin of, as you said, the Hollywood guy. He's just kind of seemed to be the linchpin, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Me and Spikes were super close, still are super close. We talk a lot. He was the one that called me about my Hall of Fame stuff. And so we talk a lot. So, to me, he's just big teddy bear, you know what I mean? But on the field, man, I remember vividly practices where Coach Meyer had to pretty much stop practice because he wouldn't stop hitting Tebow. He got so upset. It was a competitive drill where he felt like Coach Meyer was cheating for the offense. So he wouldn't stop hitting Tebow. Or, you know what I mean? There's times where he's just laying guys out. I mean, and, that he would literally have to either be taken out or we would have to stop practice sometimes because, I mean, that's how physical he really was. And, he's just a monster, man. I remember one time I had to blitz pickup, me and him. And he would always, we call it brother-in-law in football. If we're cool, we kind of take it easy on each other, especially on your own team. Well, one time I had to pick him up and this was a day where he had blanked out. And I mean, he ran through me. And after the play, I'm like, man, what's going on? He's like, man, I blanked out. I forgot it was you. You know what I mean? But like, those are the stories, man, where like, dude, you do not want to step in front of him because he's a Mack truck, man, I'm telling you.
You get those guys in college football all the time. I think the difference is you have a hard time finding the ones that can do that and back it up with solid play every single game. And Brandon Spikes, from a leadership standpoint, like I said, he demanded that everybody lived up to that expectation on the defensive side of the ball. It makes it a lot easier, too, when you've got guys like Carlos Dunlap and Justin Trotto and those guys up front. But he did a hell of a job as a leader. And he was one of those guys who was fearless, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a middle linebacker that, 240, 245 that can carry through a hole and blow up a 320-pound offensive lineman off his feet. And, I can tell you he did it in practice. It wasn't just in games. I mean, he did that, and he practiced that way, and there's a reason he played as good as he did on Saturdays.
I'm telling you, Spikes is one of those guys where you hear about guys in the NFL who are kind of like super competitive, and you see like guys talking trash on the sideline. Like, he's like that 24/7. He's an ultimate competitor. You want him on your team. I'm talking about, some of the things that he's done is noted, from the Georgia incident, just how and to me, none of that is, outrageous because this football is what we grew up on. That's how he grew up. And that's just how he played the game. He wanted to get the advantage. He wanted to taunt guys if he had to, if he thought it would intimidate him. Anything he could do to have the advantage, he was all for it. And I think a lot of teams were scared of him.
I think probably the biggest surprise for that 08 team, of course, the 07 defense kind of took a step back. But, some young guys, Joe Hayden, who made the conversion to cornerback, didn't play that position. And then Janoris Jenkins, who's a freshman out there making plays, and they're going against this high-powered Oklahoma offense, but those guys are out there holding their own.
Well, Janoris, man, I'm going to speak on him first because to be a freshman and play the way he played all year was just special. I remember him coming in, and I remember us we're doing one-on-ones in practice. He would always tell me and Percy to get up. And because he wanted to go against smaller, quicker guys who he felt like he couldn't really handle. You know what I mean? But that was special to me in itself because normally freshmen are just kind of like, passive and taking things as they come. And he was calling guys out. Hey, no, I want Percy. I want Brandon. You know what I mean? And that was, again, for him to be a freshman, he played the way he played all year. That was just, it showed how big Pahokee ball is. Joe came in as a receiver, really, and to learn the defensive back, to play DB the way he did, and him hold down his side the way he did for 3 years, man. It just shows, it's showing now he's still playing in the NFL, but it shows the type of athlete and competitor he was because, again, I remember when Joe came in, he was playing offense at first, they switched into defense, was kind of grasping it, but struggling. Then you snap your fingers and the next year he's, a starter for a national championship team. So all those guys, man, were supreme athletes. It's really, really special players.
I'm pretty sure Joe Hayden's glad with that decision.
Yes.
He's still playing in the league right now, so he's had a good couple paydays. But I don't know if we will. I don't want to say I doubt we'll ever see anybody play the cornerback position as good pound for pound. But pound for pound, as a defensive player, Joe Hayden is the best I've been around. And Reggie Nelson is probably right there with him. But I mean, Joe Hayden, pound for pound, is probably one of the strongest skill set player that I've ever seen. He still plays that way in the NFL today, but man, he shows up, and he shows up for the spotlight. Janoris Jenkins, very similar. The swagger and just the complete attitude they play with, it's fearless. And I think that that's one thing that the 08 defense had. They had that tenacity. They had that fearless mentality that there wasn't anybody you could put in front of them that was going to, throw a hitch in the game plan. So, when you look at the defensive staff, the game plan was always on cue, and you had the players to back it up.
Probably one of the more images that sit in my head is just how big Sam Bradford's eyes get when Ahmad Black makes that late interception where it looks like it's almost maybe going to be an incomplete pass, but by the time both players get up, somehow Ahmad Black rips the ball away from the offensive player, and that kind of just sets up Florida to go on and win the national championship. But that interception was just kind of out of nowhere, and it's so funny to see how Sam Bradford couldn't even believe that it had happened.
Ahmad, man, he's another guy that I've seen go through a lot, and I know it was special for him, and it was special for me seeing him, because I remember he was like at the bottom of the totem pole out of all the Lakeland guys that came in. And for him, again, to snap his fingers, and then, he's a starter at safety, having, the most picks out of all those guys and all that stuff there, man. It just shows that a lot of guys like myself and Ahmad were just, bred off hard work. You know what I mean? Some of the guys were highly recruited. We had some guys that weren't as highly touted, but at the same time, we all were competitive. We went in the mentality that, everyone could be special as long as we work. And I think, the plays that everyone made in that game and that whole year kind of just showed it.
We had a ball hawk mentality on defense. When I think you look at the turnover ratio in our season was pretty phenomenal in 2008. I think 2006 was very similar too, right? A lot of turnovers. We didn't give the ball up too much. We took care of the football. But yeah, that by Ahmad Black, between the major right hit, the Ahmad Black interception, and then the David Nelson jump pass 2.0 was probably the three biggest things that resonate in your mind from that game, or at least three of the bigger ones in mine. Just the big play moments, momentum swings, and of course you seal it with the jump pass to David Nelson. Puts us in a position to go out and hold, and we're good to go.
Let's go to that jump pass, of course. Near and dear to your heart, the play itself. So go back to 06 first versus LSU. How does that play work out?
It was a lot more unathletic than the 08 one, I can tell you that much. But, a great moment, obviously, in a game that we needed bad. And every October, if you're a Florida fan, a Florida player, what the schedule holds. You got, you start early with Tennessee, and you got to get through an early East game to kind of put you on track. But then in the middle of the season, right in the heart of October, you've got to go through a gauntlet of, Georgia, LSU. At that year in 06 was Auburn. It's about 4 weeks in a row that we really were testing ourselves with top 10 teams. And so for us, I think that 06 game, what really resonates, I think, was the game, the flow at the moment. When you hold LSU on the goal line and get the ball back, and then you come down, Reggie Nelson has some huge hits. We get the ball back on interception. You come back down the field and face a few penalties, and the clock's ticking away. And, Urban is always notorious for – Urban and Dan and our offensive coaches at the time, very notorious for pulling out the right place for the right moments. And that was one of those that just – I'm not sure why it resonates so much. I think it's just the moment of the game and how bad we needed points on the board in a game where, touchdowns are going to be very, very slim to come by. So the biggest thing for me, I think, is just the pause for effect moment when the ball's in the air, and then the eruption. I think that's why most fans that were at that game remember it so well. And really, obviously, for me, a very great moment in my career, and something that I'll never forget.
The 1-08 to win the national championship. How was that? Of course, it goes to a wide receiver in David Nelson, but how was that play? How different was it? Was it the same exact play, just a different player? But take us from 06 to 08 in the jump pass.
A little bit different setup, as opposed to fullback tight end. Had a couple of heavies with Javier Estopina and a couple of guys in there to kind of decoy the heavy run game play. And then, of course, you have David Nelson, who, came on strong at the end of that 08 season. Had a lot to do with why we were in that position in the first place. Not a huge recognition type of guy, but he's always one of those attention to detail players. Ran crisp routes, did exactly what you needed him to do, was a special teams guy, a lot of trust between the coaching staff and him. And so he's a perfect guy for being the recipient of that. I think if I was play calling, I think you call it to the tight end and give me a little love in my last game. But at the same time, I can't complain about, throwing it to the other Texan out wide. And for me, great moment for me, because I had a lot to do with hoping David would come to Florida, as a Texas guy and a guy that I recruited on his recruiting trip to get him here. That was a big moment for me, because I was so proud of him to have that moment in such a big game.
24-14 final score for Florida-Oklahoma. Was it a closer and lower scoring game than you guys expected? Both high-flying offenses. Florida scoring in the 40s, Oklahoma scoring in the 50s, and lo and behold, it's a 10-point win, 24-14.
I think for us to knowing how good their defense was, knowing exactly what we were about, we knew it was going to be a tough game. We knew that was going to be one of those games you had to earn one way or another. I think that their expectation was it was going to be more of a walkover on defense, seeing as they were averaging 60-plus points a game. So for us to win, we'd have to score, 40. But I think the defense did everything we needed them to do and more. And so, when the defense plays lights out the way they did, it really puts you in a position as an offense to just try and maintain the flow of the game. In the last few drives, I think we really did a good job of stretching the field out, taking some clock time and playing it the way we needed to. But I always tell people, it doesn't matter how you win a game. A win's a win. And if you're playing a national championship game, it even furthers that point, because you find a way to dig and claw yourself out no matter what, as long as you win. And so, for us, it could have been 24-23. We would have been just happy with that.
You always think you're going to blow somebody out. So I definitely think we were confident enough to feel like if we came out and executed at a high level, that it wouldn't be close. But again, you stated earlier, we had some turnovers early. We didn't execute the way we did throughout the whole game. So I think those are things that contributed to the score being a little closer than it should be.
Bringing home a second title in 3 seasons, how was this season, the 2008 season, this national championship? What was your thoughts after that game, living in that moment, of course, and how was it different than the 06 one?
Seeing in 06 what the process led us to, when Urban came in and harped on the buy-in, harped on the mental toughness and how to be a championship caliber football team, we didn't know any better. We were just hungry. We knew we were talented. We knew we had some guys who could, if we put it together, could play some good ball. And then we saw what that looked like. The 08 team, we knew exactly what we had. We knew we had championship caliber mentality. We knew we had the players. We had everything. I think for me, being a senior who was a redshirt senior, redshirting my senior year. So I wasn't supposed to be there in 08. For me, I redshirted the season before and had 3 surgeries in about 9 months. So I was just happy to be, granted another year to be a part of that. And so the difference, I think, for me is we knew exactly what our identity was. Whereas in 06, we really didn't know any better, but you couldn't tell us that there was anybody you could put across from us that could beat us. In 08, we just knew you couldn't. And we almost challenged you to try.
You're older, and your stamp is really kind of on that one because, again, as freshmen, we're kind of just wet behind the ears, just following the lead of the seniors. But as a junior, you're seasoned vets that, went through a tough year, not really knowing how to prepare for a season. Now you go through a tough offseason, and now you're back. And the proof shows that hard work is going to get you through whatever, because we know for a fact how hard it was that offseason, and it all paid off getting back to the national title game. And, a lot of us had a lot of accolades and awards after the season. So, again, man, it just showed if you work hard, anything's possible.